get started, so don't. Movie Buff Specialist Phil and John are back, and tonight we are talking about Thor, Ragnarok, and Thanksgiving. And tomorrow is Thanksgiving here in the States, so congratulations. We've made it to something that is relevant to what's happening, right? We are actually talking about a movie that is about what's happening, and I hope none of you have a Thanksgiving like the people in this movie. But episode 17 of this series is what we have come to the realization of, if I have remembered to add every MCU movie to my list. And this might be the last episode of the podcast, because next week is Black Panther, and I saw that movie because it was nominated for Best Picture, and I hated that movie, and I can't believe I'm gonna make myself watch it again. So pray for me. But what do I have to be thankful for? That I only have to watch Black Panther one more time the rest of my life. So Thor, Ragnarok, and Thanksgiving. John, how you doing? How's your not having Thanksgiving tomorrow? Because you've already
I'm
had
good.
it.
I was actually just gonna say it's a little weird watching this like holiday film when it's not a holiday. Like Thanksgiving was like 6 weeks ago. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why this movie's releasing now. It's so weird up in here in Canada.
Well, I mean, John, it's because the United States determines what holidays are important when they're important. That's why. That's why. I mean, it's not you. It's your country. Sorry.
Yeah, of
Sorry.
course.
Right.
Of course.
I'm done. I'm going to tweet that we're live podcasting now so that people know. But anyway, John, I'll let you go first on Thanksgiving, because I just told you I didn't actually read your review. What did you think of Thanksgiving?
Well, I had forgotten that this was one of the Grindhouse trailer movies.
I totally forgot.
Yeah, I forgot that this was something, and like, there are a lot of moments in this movie that are direct references to that trailer. Like Eli Roth does a great job of capturing that again. This movie is like so close to being a perfect slasher film. It's one of the best slasher films we have had in years. It did Scream better than the last 3 entries in the Scream franchise. But man, oh man, the pacing in the third act of this movie really brings it down.
So the third act of this movie was pretty much everything from the Grindhouse trailer.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the tricky part, right? Like, that's the thing that sucks, is they had to build to that, because I forgot that it was a Grindhouse trailer. I haven't seen Grindhouse in years, and I'll be honest with you, I watched Death Proof while talking to my friends and barely paying attention, because it was just, we were so bored. And it's a shame that follows up Planet Terror, because Planet Terror is perfection. I absolutely loved Planet Terror. That is a great freaking movie. It's so over the top. It's disgusting. It's ridiculous. Impaled into my brain is Bruce Willis's penis dripping off of his body. That is something I will never forget for as long as I live. But that being said, I went back and I rewatched the trailer, and I was dying laughing, because I remember so clearly watching that for the first time and seeing that trailer. And at the end, when he is having sex with the turkey with the person's head on it and stuff, it's just so over the top. And I remember when he revealed that the person had been cooked, and it's just so overly stuffed and everything. Like, they were just so sick. And Eli Roth is just one of the sickest dudes out there.
Yes.
I really, really, really enjoyed everything about this movie. And I even enjoyed that. I really did. I enjoyed the third act, but you could tell that the third act, getting them all sitting at the table, and, you know, the what's his name? Rick Hoffman puking through the thing, and everybody like that. It was very clear that was forced in there, because that was the expectation from the Grindhouse trailer. Everything else was much more natural, and almost none of that plot was from the Grindhouse trailer. So I was into it, though. I had a really good time. I laughed my ass off watching this movie.
Yeah, I did too. It was really fun. And that's, you sit down for an Eli Roth movie. I mean, you're either in for exploitation horror, and that's not your jam, or you're just going to have a good time. And that's just what it comes down to. And this movie kind of fit both, right? Like, I came out of it thinking, like, this is a gorier Scream, because we still have like that whodunit aspect, which is great. Is who the killer is pretty obvious when you look at a cast list? But I don't know. It was fun. It was done in a way where it's like, again, like these teenagers feel like caricatures of teenagers, and it feels like Eli Roth making fun of the slasher genre, but doing it in a sense where he absolutely knows what he's also paying homage to at the same time.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's the biggest thing. Eli Roth actually had a lot to work with this
Mhm.
movie. He had a lot to work with. And I feel like this was maybe the first time ever that Eli Roth nailed it. In my opinion,
Yeah.
I like Hostel. I do. I enjoy it. I think it's ridiculous and over the top. But this is an artistic movie. And
Mhm.
what really got me, so I wasn't sure what I was getting into. And they have that first thing where they walk in and they have the two dinners separate. And I was so confused by the one dinner. I still thought, I was like, wait, are they at the same dinner? Like, it was like a weird cut
Yes.
where I just like lost it. And I was like, oh, these are two different houses. Oops. So what really did it for me was when they break down the door the first time and the one guy walks in and hits his neck on the glass and
Yeah.
just starts gushing blood and dies. I turned to the camera that wasn't there and the person that wasn't sitting next to me and said, "Oh, this is going to be fun." And
Yeah.
it really was. It was such a good time after that. And down to the point of like the way they're talking about the guy from the other school and the way that they're talking about the different people, it's so overblown and it's so absolutely ridiculous. And what do they all go? Your waffle iron. It's
Yeah.
tremendous because, I do think that, I don't know what the age is of our listeners. I don't know what the age is I don't really remember when Black Friday died because I remember my senior year, my freshman year of high school, or college, senior year of high school, freshman year of college. I remember going out for Black Friday with all my friends. I didn't do it after that, but I don't know if that was when Black Friday kind of died down where you actually went to a store. But the Tickle Me Elmo death is iconic in culture. Somebody
Yeah.
died over a Tickle Me Elmo because there was such a mad rush to get that Tickle Me Elmo. Black Friday used to be pure chaos. People would just literally beat the shit out of each other. And it is a great point. Like Eli Roth talking about it in this movie, it kind of gives you a sense of when this movie takes place because it's not
Mhm.
necessarily 2023, but it gives
No.
you a sense of when it takes place because it's no longer just on Black Friday. Now it's on Thanksgiving night. And that's always the funniest part. Black Friday now starts at 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving's no longer a holiday because now people are going and working on Thanksgiving Day. Just because it's 6 p.m., dude, the Cowboys game isn't even halfway over by that point. What are we talking about? So it's no longer a holiday. And I really appreciated the on the nose style that Eli Roth went with in
Mhm.
this. And he made the characters such cartoon versions of each other that you didn't care really what happened to any of them, but you were going to be on board with whatever it was he chose was going to be their fate.
Yeah, and all of their faces were fantastic. I love the kills in this movie. The kills,
Mhm.
they were so entertaining. They were just lined up perfectly. Eli Roth has again, like with his like with Hostel and things like that. He often goes like overboard with kills.
Yeah.
The kills were quite tame in this movie in comparison, but
The
they still
only
felt like
one,
Eli Roth.
yeah, the only one that absolutely disturbed me bad was the cooking the lady. I mean, that is just
Yeah,
such
yeah.
a ridiculous thing to even think about because like I knew that was coming because it was in the trailer. But thinking about the idea, like throw away the fact that this is a B movie, campy, horror, whatever.
Yeah.
Just think about the idea of like a human being cooked alive. It's pretty terrifying. It's pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
So that was the only one that really bothered me. Even the rest of them, I was dying though. The rest of them, I was like, when he's
Mhm.
hitting the one kid's head with the mallet, oh my god, that was so satisfying. And the one girl where he dunks her head in the warm water and then smashes her face into the
Freezer.
what do you call
Yeah.
it, the freezer. Like those are really fun, cool ideas. So I was in on the kills and everything, and there were graphic ones, but it was cartoony. The
Yeah.
the the overly gory scenes weren't. They didn't like Hostel. It feels almost too realistic when they cut the
Mhm.
Achilles and when they do things like that when they're burning the eyeball. It's really graphic and it's gross. This was really graphic, but it was being graphic in a B movie style, and I'm all
Yeah,
about
I
that.
mean,
That is
it
fun.
it never lost its place as a grindhouse movie.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
that's what was really important. And like if you went into this movie not knowing about the Grindhouse thing, and like I remember right before sitting down and watching it, you kind of might be caught off guard by how it's handled.
Mm-hmm.
But going into it, I wasn't expecting a masterpiece, and I think that's why I enjoyed it. I had such a fun time watching this movie, and the people I went with were like, it was okay. It wasn't great. The third act was like really like not doing it for them, but I just had a fun time.
Mm-hmm. That's how I felt. Patrick Stahl says, so tonight's episode is about a perfect slasher film followed by a perfect film. I don't know when we're talking about a perfect film, but we're definitely.
I don't know when we're talking about a perfect slasher film.
We're talking about it pretty close though, and a lot of the reviews on Letterboxd that I've been reading are talking about how like it does feel like we're in a bit of a slasher renaissance here, and this one really did feel like an 80s, 90s, early 2000s slasher film, which weren't the perfect slasher films, you know. And I don't like Halloween, but Halloween's what, 78. Halloween being 78, that's the one people generally consider a perfect slasher film. A lot of the slasher films that followed that up, they're not perfect, but they're so overly campy. And that's what this movie was. This movie was so overly campy. The girl is escaping the man swinging an axe at her while she's in the high school. No problem. She gets away from them, no issues. You have all the characters so easily. Oh, it's about money, and it's about John Carver, who is our founder, and it's so, the motivations are so clear, and the characters are so over the top that you need to then make sure that the violence feels the same way. I think, what was the movie? You're gonna know this better than me. What slasher movie is it where the girl gets stabbed in the head and the guy lifts her head up and her boobs come into the bottom of the screen? What movie is that?
What movie is that?
I forget what movie it is, but it's a slasher movie.
Is that the My Bloody Valentine remake?
Was that? I forget what it is.
Maybe
that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. And this movie felt like it had that without going to that level. But I mean, like the girl jumping on the trampoline, like it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, okay. We can't really discuss a lot about this movie without spoiling a few things, because it is a whodunit. So, regular spoiler warning here for our podcast, because we have to kind of discuss some of this stuff. The way that this movie set up so many red herrings, it takes you a while to kind of piece together who it could possibly be throughout the film, because it leaves so many possible options open.
And a lot of the characters don't actually have payoffs, which I thought was cool. Like Rick Baker doesn't have a payoff. And that was something from the 80s movies too. You have a lot of nerdy characters. They did a good job with McCarthy. They did a good job with Patrick Dempsey. They did a good job with that Jacob kid. They did a good job with Bobby. They did a good job with the other group friends. You really do believe that it could be anybody. And they do a good job with the mother. The stepmother, she's a pain in the ass. She's awful. They do a good job even with the fact that Julia's father is in the Russian something, who the hell knows? But they do it.
They heavily imply it, but they never straight up say it, and that's part of the charm of the film.
Yes, exactly. So I think that, I agree with you. Even though you might sit there and say, "Oh, it's obvious who the killer is," I didn't actually feel like it was all that obvious, because it did a nice job of giving you a little bit of everyone, and you do get it through the eyes of the only one you know it's not is your main female character, which whatever her name is. That's the only one that you know it isn't, is Jessica. It could be anybody else, and you wouldn't really be all that shocked. I would have been a little shocked if it was Julia, just because she is such a tertiary character. But that's also the fun that Eli Roth is having in this movie, of playing with what you already know about the genre, what you already know about the characters in these genres, and then what you already are going to get implied from the fact that it's a Thanksgiving campy horror movie.
But a lot of it just goes to the setup that Eli Roth gives us, because the beginning of this movie is perfection. Like you said, there's that weird cut with the first two dinners, and it's a little confusing until you realize that we are actually seeing employer versus employee, how they're changed, how they're spending their Thanksgivings, what they need to do, and then the chaos it devolves into.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. That entire scene at Right Mart, pure gold. Like exactly what you want. It's chaotic. It feels, I don't know, it almost feels like something out of like a Final Destination movie or something like that, right? Where it's just like unbridled chaos happening all over the place, people dying left and right, and no one's able to stop it. And it's all brought up like through this lens of like privilege and like the wealthy elite stomping on like the general population and stuff, and
it's all consumerism.
It's all consumerism, and it's so beautiful. It is so well done. It's ridiculous. Again, like the guy who gets his throat slit open as he's going through the door stays alive long enough to grab his waffle iron before dying. Like it's pure, like this perfect blend of horror comedy.
Yeah, and that was the thing I liked the most about it. So like when we did Saw 10 on here, I did feel like that one grossed me out a lot. I was uncomfortable watching. I was getting a little sick to my stomach at certain parts of that. 'Cause I don't really like these. I don't like slasher movies. I don't like slasher movies because I always found them to be a little silly, which I know is something John and I disagree on for the most part. But I always find them to just be a little over the top, and like it's not something that's ever really struck a chord with me. I love a good horror movie. I had Rosemary's Baby and Psycho and The Exorcist and The Shining all in my top 100. Even Seven, which I consider a horror movie, is in my top 100. But I don't love the overly, like, I'm going to chop your head off and you're going to have to watch every second of it, or I'm going to ram a bunch of needles into your arm and you're going to watch every second of it, or whatever. It's going to broken bones where it's been. But when Bobby Goldenarm breaks his arm, I was laughing my ass off. Like, it was so well handled because it is so ridiculous. It almost had a scary movie feel to it. And I'm talking about the actual scary movies, the Wayans brothers scary movies.
Yeah.
Where there's the one scene in it where I think it's Regina King, where she's talking about like, oh, what? You want me to break my leg like this? And she snaps her leg in half. You want me to break my arm like this? Oh, no, help me. I can't run. It reminded me of that. Where it's just so ridiculous, but it's taking itself more seriously than those movies. But you also know it's Eli Roth on the other side of the camera. So how seriously is he really taking? You know, he's laughing his ass off the entire time he's doing it.
Well, it's like you mentioned, like when Bobby breaks his arm, I don't do this at theaters. I legitimately exclaimed, but that's his pitching arm.
Yeah.
Because that's the vibe you get when you're watching this movie. It's like, it feels like the type of movie you just go see with a bunch of friends, or like you're watching at home with a bunch of friends, and you are just laughing and discussing how ridiculous everything is the entire time.
It is. This is a perfect. So like John and I are going to do, we talked about it in January. We're going to start doing a once a week movie podcast for $5 patrons. So if you want to be a patron, there's your plug. Starting in January, if you're a movie guy, once a week, you're going to be getting a movie podcast. And we were talking about, like, it's kind of going to be a little random. It's going to be a little bit of, I was throwing around the idea of calling it like $5 Tuesdays, because, you know, when you go to a movie theater, depending on where you live, that's normally what they do, is the $5 Tuesday of like, oh, it's the day of the week that nobody goes to the movies. The weekend's over. Everybody's busy. Like Tuesday, you're in the full swing of the week, whatever. So they do $5 Tuesdays. At least that's what they do by me. You were saying it's $6.25 by you, but it's $5 patron, so it's $5 Tuesdays.
Yeah.
This is the perfect movie for that kind of thing, though. Like, this is the perfect, it's a Tuesday. There's no sports on. Your family just ordered a pizza because you actually had a worse day at work than you thought you were going to have. And you just said, you know what, let's go to the movies because I just got to get out of the house. This is the perfect movie for that. This is the ultimate. It's Blockbuster Friday and it's downpouring. So you go to Blockbuster, you pick out a couple movies, and this is one of them, and you sit there and you watch back-to-back movies while it's pouring outside. It's a no responsibility, pure fun. You're going to laugh, you're going to cringe, and no matter what, you're going to have a good time watching it. And I really respect that. And this is the type of movie where if you were to say to me, Phil, we got to do a podcast this week, what movie should we do? These are the types of movies I want to do, like bringing attention. Because this, if you look at box office wise, it came out in a crowded time. I mean, you had the new the new Hunger Games, which is very polarizing, but made a whole lot of money. Trolls band together made a whole lot of money. This beat the Marvels in its first weekend by $0.2 million. So not by much, but it made $10.3 million. It's a slasher movie at a busy time. It's counter programming. So it kind of makes sense, right? But this is that type of movie that you want to bring awareness to. I don't care about bringing awareness to a movie like, when I just look at my top 10 movies from this year, I don't need to bring awareness about Dead Reckoning or John Wick or Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon. But I want you to know about The Holdovers. I want you to know about Bottoms. I want you to know about Priscilla. I want you to know about Thanksgiving. This is a movie that I want to be an advocate for because I had such a damn good time watching it. And this is not my genre. It's not. But it just was made so incredibly well. So good for Eli Roth on pulling this off. And I'm going to look up what the budget was so that I can see if it had any type of success. Movie. I don't care about people's Thanksgiving budget. Oh, it's only $15 million.
Yeah, I was going to say, this had to have been a very cheap movie to make.
So $15 million, and worldwide, it's already made $15 million. So, I mean, you figure this makes another $10 million worldwide. That's not a box office success, but it's not a flop. Everybody made their money back on this movie. And then they made a little extra. They got their pennies on the dollar that the SAG after was, striking over. Yeah. So it makes sense. But it's a fun movie. And this is whichever streaming service picks this one up, congratulations, because you're getting a good one. Especially if this is Amazon Prime, that $3.99 rental. God, come next Halloween time, people are gonna be renting this like crazy. It's just a damn good time. This is a fun summer thunderstorm movie. Like so many different opportunities to watch this, and I'm honestly excited to watch it again. I won't go see it again in theaters just because there's so many freaking movies coming out. But this is a really, really fun movie that I can't wait to watch again.
Yeah, it's and that's just what it is. It's a lot of fun. Watch it with as many people as you possibly can because it's just that fun type of movie. People you enjoy watching movies with. Don't watch it with people you don't enjoy watching movies with.
That is
who are lame and won't find this type of thing fun because maybe one of them. Throw one of them in there to just like increase the experience a little bit. But it's if you want to have a fun ride, watch this movie. Watch Eli Roth have these little nods to all of these like slasher films that have come before, right? Like it's got its Scream with the whodunit of it all and Dewey the Cat. You can't tell me that's not a Scream reference.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
It's got this like I Know What You Did Last Summer feel with like the parade and everything. It has the dinner table is like straight out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Eli Roth, you can tell Eli Roth is a person who loves this genre and is just having so much fun making this movie.
Yeah, and all those little nods and those references are such a fun thing for horror fans to recognize and to see. And that's why I think this movie's gonna have legs for years to come. I think this is gonna be one that people are talking about further down the line because it has the thought behind it that a lot of movies in this genre don't have. And that's more than you can ask for nowadays. Because I mean, we've talked a lot of horror movies on this podcast. We really have. I mean, we're 17 episodes in. 4 months ago was July, or what is it? Yeah, it was July. We started this in July. We were coming up into horror movie season. So we've done a lot. We did The Exorcist, A Believer, The Nun 2. We did Saw 10. I mean, Saw 10 had some, they put effort into that movie. But this is a movie that just gets it and knows what its audience is looking for when it sits down to watch it. And you know what? I think Eli Roth is gonna have a little bit of a rebirth here. So good for him because he deserves it. But I think the actors and actresses, Nell Verlicue, I'd never seen her in my life. I had no idea who the hell that person was. I thought she played that role really well. I really liked her.
She did. Yeah, she did. I actually quite enjoyed her. I enjoyed like these little bit parts that a lot of people had. What's his name? Who's the dad again?
Oh, Rick Hoffman. He's so good.
Rick Hoffman? God, he's good. He's so good in this movie. It's just like he's playing the same character Rick Hoffman always plays, essentially, but it's just perfect. It's perfect casting for this movie. It's a lot of fun. Patrick Dempsey playing a cop again, like kind of reprising a similar role that he had in Scream 3. Like it feels good. It feels good watching this.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So there you go, everybody.
So this is our.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What were you gonna say?
No, go ahead. You're up.
I was gonna say this is our third of the 5 Grindhouse trailers now that have become full movies.
Yeah. So I saw Machete, but I haven't seen it since it came out.
Sure.
And then what was the other one?
Hobo with a Shotgun.
Yeah, I never saw Hobo with a Shotgun.
Oh, I saw that movie in theaters. That was a fun time.
Yeah, I've always heard good things about that one, but I never saw Hobo with a Shotgun.
It's pure Grindhouse schlock, but
that came out my first year of college. Yeah, it was a Rucker Hauer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. Only made $834,000 at the box office, but it also only cost $3 million. So
it's also a Canadian movie.
Yeah, do with that what you will. I'm excited for them to make Don't, because that was the funniest trailer out of all of them, when it just keeps saying don't. Oh my God, it's so funny. I remember that. That was great. And what's the other one they haven't done? The Werewolf, was it SS Werewolf?
Werewolf Woman of the SS.
That's it, Werewolf Woman.
Yeah.
Oh God, dude, they were so ridiculous.
Which is the Rob Zombie one. And then Dont's obviously Edgar Wright. Like, come on, guys, get on these. We want them. We want them now.
Let's make it happen. I'm all about it. That's so funny, man. Oh my God. Don't.
Yeah.
I forgot it was Werewolf Women of the SS. That is ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add for this, though, or you want to jump over to?
I don't think we can emphasize how fun this movie is anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. So let's jump over to Thor Ragnarok. The third Thor movie that we've done, in my opinion, arguably the best, but that's a pretty low bar as far as I'm concerned. Wait, before we do that, John, are you ranking your 2023 movies as they come out?
Not as they come out. I have to
Or I mean, as you're watching them, or no? You're not?
No.
Okay, never mind then. Okay.
But I will.
Yeah.
Soon.
No, I'm sure you will, liar. I had Thanksgiving at number 5, so that's why I was just wondering.
I don't think it's number 5. Oh, it might be number 5.
I have seen 20 movies this year.
I've definitely seen more than that. So
yeah, I'm talking only obviously I've seen like 300 movies this year.
Well, we've seen 17 just for this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, I'm jumping into Thor Ragnarok now. Here we are. So, Taika Waititi directs it. Everybody's back. The addition of Jeff Goldblum, Carl Urban, Kate Blanchett, Mark Ruffalo's in this one. I am so happy Asgard exploded and died. I am. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. It was the same feeling I had for the first 2 Thor movies. When you like the first Thor movie, I forget which part I even complained about. I forget if I complained about Earth or if I complained about Asgard, but it felt like they didn't mesh as much as they needed to. And it felt like there was just pointless. And in this one, God, I could have cared less that Kate Blanchett was doing whatever she was doing in Asgard. I was so into the Hulk and Thor and the whatever Jeff Goldblum's character's name is, and Tessa Thompson. What's his name?
The Grand Master.
The Grand Master. And then Tessa Thompson. Like, I was all into that stuff. I thought that was so much fun. But the Asgard stuff, I'm just like, I don't care. I just don't care. And I feel like it is the fault of the first 2 movies in this. And then the fact that Asgard doesn't really come up in the Avengers movies and stuff, which I guess does it come up in Age of Ultron? I don't even remember. That movie's so bad. But it doesn't feel like it matters too much to me. Yeah. And because of that, that's the bookends of the movie, that's why I gave it 2.5 stars. I did not think I would enjoy actual banter and conversation and whatever between the Hulk and Thor, but I did. And I gotta say, and Patrick Stahl says it here, and Rock Guy, Taika Waititi's voice acting in this movie as Korg is incredible. Like, absolutely incredible. I was dying laughing every time because I couldn't believe I was watching Taika Waititi. So I did really I appreciated a lot in this movie. And I'm looking at it, and I was struggling. I was telling you beforehand, I'm kind of struggling with where to put this. I actually think I'm going to put this, I'd originally put it below. No, I have it in the right spot. This is my favorite of the Thor movies, and I have it just below Ant-Man, which is the only 2.5-star movie I have above it. So I think this is the right spot for it. It has a lot of highs. The Asgard stuff, man, when Taika Waititi's doing well, as long as it keeps its roots, we can keep it, and blah blah blah, and then it blows up. Oh, I was so happy. I was so happy. And oh, there goes the roots. There goes the foundation. I was like, yes, there goes the foundation. Get out of here. I know that's not how you feel about it, but man, I just could care less about the Asgard stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I still enjoy. I actually enjoy a bit of the Asgard stuff because I find Kate Blanchett's like Hela might be the second most interesting villain we have had in the entire MCU to this point.
That's fair.
Like, and the only other one who, like, in comparison, is Loki.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, which is impressive because you're just talking about how you're not a big fan of the Thor movies. But I think the two best villains we have gotten in the MCU are from this trilogy of films, which I guess we can't really call a trilogy because they don't really flow into each other at all.
They do not flow. If you watch them one after the other and didn't watch anything else, it is nonsense.
Yeah, especially when Doctor Strange appears for absolutely no reason at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. I'm going to be honest.
Nope. I was just like, this is unnecessary. I get why it's here because you're like setting things up for the future and stuff. Makes absolutely no sense though.
Yeah. It really is just nonsense. But
overall, like, I mean, hot goth girl Kate Blanchett is amazing.
She's amazing at everything.
I mean, she's Kate Blanchett, right? Like, she's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I think she's actually, like, intimidating in this film, which I think is something that the MCU has failed to do with most of its villains.
Well, yeah, and especially like when the secondary villain in this movie is so comic booky and over the top with Jeff Goldblum, it's not.
If you can even call him a villain.
Yeah, he's hilarious. I thought he was so funny. I was all about Jeff Goldblum. I'm a big Jeff Goldblum fan. You know, anything he's in. I met Jeff Goldblum. I have a picture of it on my Instagram, just so everybody knows. If you want to follow me on Instagram, do that there. But like Jeff Goldblum in real life is exactly what he plays in all the movies. It's very funny.
Really,
it's very, very funny.
That's not surprising at all.
Yeah, but it's I liked Kate Blanchett's villain. Mm-hmm. But it's the fact that it takes place in Asgard where I'm just like, I get why it had to, because she's coming back, because Odin died. She's the firstborn. She wants her rightful place on the throne. I get it. I mean, I understand. I should care a lot more. But I just feel like the reign of Asgard, like who's going to take over the throne, everything like that, has always felt so forced to me. It's always felt like something that is thrown in there because it has to be thrown in there because it gives Loki motivation and it gives Thor motivation, right. But it doesn't feel like it's important enough to warrant an entire movie. And so far now I've watched 3 movies that are involving the secession of what goes on at Asgard. And I just don't really care.
To be fair, it wasn't this full movie though.
It wasn't, but it was the A storyline though. Even though it's the bookend, it's not there for a majority of the middle.
The main storyline,
but it's the main story of this movie, even if it doesn't take up the most time, because it certainly doesn't take up the most time. Sitar or wherever they are, that takes up the most time.
Yeah, for sure. I don't totally get what you are saying, because the problem is we never spent enough time on Asgard to really feel connected to it at all. It's a CGI mess. It looks terrible.
Yeah,
the CGI in this movie. The CGI in this movie, very bad. It did not age well at all. It is so bad. There's so much green screening in this movie that every time you see a physical set, you're like saying, "Hurrah! Yeah, finally, real filmmaking."
And you can tell, like, it is very obvious. Yeah, it's really, really obvious.
And like, there's some ones where it's like, why is this green screen? Like this fjord in Norway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, why is this green screen? Why aren't you just in a field somewhere, guys? Like, make it work. It's so easy. There are fields literally everywhere. But whatever. I mean, they've done this. I mean, it's only going to get worse. So I guess we can't really. I guess we'll just keep complaining for the next 16 films. But like, I also feel like they almost rush part of this Asgard story to get to the other story, like the World War Hulk of it all. Which again is also kind of an important thing. Like, this comic book that they are taking from is a Hulk storyline, not a Thor storyline for the majority.
I remember
of this
you
movie.
telling me that, yeah.
So it feels a little disjointed. It's great having Hulk in another movie where we actually get to see Hulk as a character rather than Bruce Banner as a character the entire time. But because of that, like, we get this whole stuff with Odin at the beginning of this movie that feels incredibly rushed. And then, like, Anthony Hopkins is like, yeah, I'm out. I'm done.
That was exactly how I felt. Once, because that felt useless, and then Thor and Loki go and do their thing, and here comes Hela, and then they get separated and they get thrown away. And I feel like that's been the plot of all of these movies, right? Like, Thor has something important happen at home, but he gets taken away from it. Now he needs to fight his way back. Okay, yeah, I've seen that 3 times now. But like, I didn't know what to feel until it really did take me until I love Jeff Goldblum. So I'll say that first. But it took me until when the Hulk is revealed to be the other guy that I said, oh, okay. Like, now I'm into this movie. And I, knowing nothing about these movies and not looking into it and not even bothering to look at posters, I didn't know the Hulk was in this. So when you had mentioned that in an earlier podcast, I mean, it went one ear and out the other. I forgot when it was going to happen. I forgot how it was going to happen. You know, it just was what it was. So I really enjoyed this. And I thought what they did with the Hulk was really funny. I thought the way he acts, I thought the mannerisms, the lines of dialogue after he calls him stupid, and then he really does speak like he's stupid the entire time. I thought that was really good. And the scene that really made me laugh was when they go up and they finally get, like, the demon thing, whatever, Ragnarok or whatever it's called, to come and destroy everything. And then Hulk goes and just wants to beat it up. And he's like, but giant monster. It's like that type of stuff I'm all in on. Because again, that feels comic booky, and I think that's really, really, really fun. But it's that secondary stuff. It was very rushed because it's not that interesting. That was the heart, that was the meat and potatoes of this movie. And that's why, like, when I talk about the Guardians movies, I like both Guardians movies because they kind of feel like the middle part of this movie. They're all over the place, chaotic. It feels comic booky. It feels video game-ish. But the Guardians movies don't have these bookends that this movie has. So that's just how it felt for me.
Right, but I think, like, the big difference between this movie and the Guardians movie is this movie has character development.
Well, it doesn't, because I think that there's a lot of characters in this movie that aren't all that well developed. I think that like, your secondary villain isn't developed. Jeff Goldblum is not really developed at all. I think Anthony Hopkins' development actually doesn't make all that much sense. It's just like, now I'm going to die after Loki did whatever. Like, they don't explain that enough, that Loki took over his body and now Anthony Hopkins. I don't understand
It feels like they wrote themselves into a corner at the end of the Dark World and was like, oh, we need to fix this now, because if we don't address it, people are going to be like, well, what about this?
Yeah.
And there's no way to get Loki in this movie if we don't do this.
Yeah.
But they didn't have a good way to write it out.
And that was my biggest. So I agree with you. Like, Thor, good character development. Tessa Thompson's character was good. Hela, we've already talked about. I think that the Hulk was fun. Loki, I'm just whatever, because it just feels like
Loki wasn't great in this one.
It feels like they don't know what Loki's motivations are. I understand that Loki is supposed to be mischievous. So I totally am fine with that. And I think when Loki's on his game, Loki is fun. But I feel like because the 3 Thor movies are so disjointed, and because Loki is a villain in the Avengers, they were having a hard time at this point of figuring out, okay, where is Loki on this spectrum?
Yes.
And so, like, the Guardians movies, I think that it's about even in terms of character development, because I think there's some that work and I think there's some that just don't work at all. And I think that for me, the fact that we're on the third Thor, I feel like we should have had better character development than we probably did. And that was my main frustration. Because also, like, here's one of my big annoyances with these movies. They knew that these were going to be hits, and they knew they were going to make a bunch of Thors. They knew they were going to make a bunch of Iron Mans. They knew they were going to make a bunch of Spider-Mans. The fact that Hela is never brought up, am I wrong on this? Was she ever brought up prior to this movie?
No.
That does kind of irk me a little bit. And I'm not saying that she should be like, oh, you never know, she could show up. But there could have been a throwaway line in the first one of, well, while it's Thor and Loki fighting over who's going to be the king, they don't even realize, like, Hela could come in, like, just to throw away something.
But that being said, like, the whole point of this is that no one knew Hela existed because Odin erased any presence of her.
Yeah, I guess that.
Right?
So but he's going to have to tell them so Odin is stupid, because Odin's going to have to tell them at some point, because she's going to come back to try to claim her throne.
But only once he dies.
But he knows he's going to die. He's going to tell his kids that something bad is going to happen when he dies.
I know.
That's pretty bad parenting. That'd be like my mom or dad die tomorrow, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, we're $10 million in debt. Now it's yours. Congratulations."
We have like one good parent in the entire MCU. Like, bad parenting just comes with the comic book.
It does. It does. I get it. It is what it is. I like what Patrick Stahl says here. The experience of seeing a new MCU movie every week is probably jarring compared to seeing a new MCU film every several months. I can definitely agree with that. I will say, though, I'm not having an easier time following the through line of the story of all 17 movies I've watched, since I'm watching them all back to back. If you watch all the James Bond movies in like every week, you did a James Bond movie, you get a pretty good idea of what they're carrying over, what characters matter, what characters they threw away. You almost laugh at the fact that this one's that. I've only seen most of the James Bond movies twice. Like, I saw them all once. Like, Goldfinger, I've seen 12 times. It doesn't matter. Casino Royale, I've seen a whole bunch of times. But I've seen most of the James Bond movies once or twice. And I still can figure, like, it's still fun to piece together whatever. And, like, you see, like, oh, this was and a lot of them don't have storylines that carry over, but this was the high point for him. And when they mention other characters, it makes sense. These are supposed to have a really cohesive storyline. I'm not having an easier time following it because it's 17 weeks. And I don't know if that's the storytelling. I don't know if that's because I don't care as much about figuring out the storyline of these movies, or if it's just not there.
I think it's because every movie is very distinctly written. I think what it comes down to is writing in general, and the fact, like, the way I think we have to kind of like give the MCU props for being like this first overly connected universe, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think when we look at the MCU now, we kind of forget they are the baseline for how this works, and they were trying to figure it out the entire time. But I think Ragnarok is a really good example of one of the mistakes they made was having so many films be written by individual writers and their small teams. Because this movie, very Taika Waititi. It feels like a Taika Waititi film.
The Devil's Anus, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was the most ridiculous joke in the entire movie, as in, like, I groaned really hard when they said that name. Mm-hmm. But, like, it is Taika Waititi. Like, it's what you come to expect from him. The banter is very Taika Waititi.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is like, again, we go back to this first bit of this film. They wrote away, like, there were so many throwaway lines to just get them to the movie where they wanted to start it. Because of what preceded it, right? Because at the very, like, we have Thor's soliloquy at the beginning of the movie where he's talking to the corpse. I guess that might not be a soliloquy then, but
that's close enough.
And he's explaining, I went off looking for the Infinity Stones, but I couldn't find any, right? Because that is the last time we saw Thor. Mm-hmm. The last time we saw Thor was at the end of Age of Ultron, and he was like, 4 Infinity Stones have showed up, better go find them. Literally, he is sitting in a room with an Infinity Stone, no comment about it. Yeah. Like, he is sitting across from Doctor Strange, who has one of these Infinity Stones he has been looking for around his neck. No comment about it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And like they just brush past it. They brush past the fact that like, Loki has replaced Odin on the throne, put him in an old folks home, which again, hilarious. Like when they show up and the old folks home is being demolished, that's funny. That's Taika Waititi doing what Taika Waititi does. How did you feel about the play on Asgard? The tragedy of Loki.
The play?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
First is Asgard. We get Luke Hemsworth playing Thor. We have Matt Damon playing Loki. Sam Neill playing Odin. We're like
I was fine
away from this being a Jurassic Park reunion.
I know. It felt like a nice little wink that we would know what was going on.
Yeah. Like, but because of that, like, Taika Waititi has to spend the first 15, 20 minutes of this movie catching us up to where he wants his movie to go. He also, I think, the part that I assume you cheered at, as soon as Hela gets to Asgard, she kills the Warriors 3, and you don't have to see them anymore. I know they're your least favorite characters in the entire MCU.
I was very excited about that, and I thought it was a just ending for characters that literally, speaking of character development, had none.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, again, Taika Waititi was just like, oh, there are these characters that, like, we can't not have in a Thor movie. I'm going to literally kill them so I don't have to write them.
Yeah. No, I know. And so I think this is a good point, though. The MCU needed to be treated almost like a TV show, right? Where you have a writer's room for a TV show. Yeah. And for each season, you might have a different writer's room. You're going to have the same showrunner all the time, but you're not going to have the same writers. There's going to be people who get promoted, leave, go do other things, blah, blah, blah. But when you have a showrunner and then you have a writer's room, it makes sure that there's consistency across the board. And look, you go from season 1 of a TV show to season 2 of a TV show, whether it's Lost, whether it's Game of Thrones, whether it's Breaking Bad, whether it's Mad Men, whether it's Yellow Jackets, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, there is a drastic change always from one season to the next. Characters you always have to adjust a little bit in the first episode of a new season. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, the characters always sound the same. They have to say certain things that point the story in the direction it needs to go, and it might not make sense with something that happened before, but the characters sound the same. The world feels the same. The problem with the MCU is they should have done each phase 1 was these writers, phase 2 was these writers, phase 3 were these writers. But they wanted to have the bigger names, then they wanted to have some throwaways, and they wanted to have this, and they wanted to have that. And also, if you get somebody and say, oh, you're going to write all 6 of the phase 2 movies, you have to pay them a lot of money to do all 6 of those, because they're also going to say, well, you think I'm the writer for this. Like, I want $20 million, like I don't just want $3 million a movie. I'm like, or $2 million or $1 million. I want $20 million flat out. And I want a percent, I want back end of this. So it's hard when it comes to a movie, but it needed to almost be treated that way because there is so much inconsistency across the board. And Patrick Stahl says Marvel comics are also pretty disjointed as a literary, air quotes universe, I would guess. Yeah, they are. But also all of those characters are in their very own distinct worlds in the comics. The Avengers is also its own thing. These movies were trying to be like, look at this coherent, cohesive story that is traveling from the first Iron Man movie all the way until whenever the hell they end this stuff.
And like in counterpoint, like events in comics are written by massive teams over, like I said, with Civil War, right? Like there's like, I think 600 issues of comics that came from like 30 some odd series that came out during that event. And like, they're still connected enough that there was a continuity between them. And the MCU just kind of misses that because, and it's like you said, it's because they want these big names, but they also want these small names at the same time, right? Like we were talking about it a lot in phase 2. Look at who's directing these people. It's TV directors and everything like that. But then all of a sudden it's like this movie, you get Ant-Man, which is a movie that was written by Edgar Wright and like feels like an Edgar Wright movie. And it also feels like its own thing compared to the other MCU movies around it. You have Thor Ragnarok, which feels like a Taika Waititi movie. But has like no cohesion with anything around it, because it almost takes the Edgar Wright approach to it, right? Where it feels like it's taken that way, like the same way that Ant-Man's taken, right? The decision to make Thor one of the most serious characters in the MCU to this point, a comedic film,
Yeah.
it was ballsy. It was
Yeah.
a major risk.
Yeah. And I honestly think it paid off. I mean, I gave this 2.5 stars, but I could see why somebody would give this 3 and 3.5. If you gave it 4, I mean, come on, whatever. But I could see why people would give this, 3.5 stars. Remember, we're working on a 4-star scale here. So for anybody who's wondering, 2.5 out of 5, no. Even though we're on Letterboxd, everybody's been ranking movies on a 4-star scale since the beginning of time. That's just how it is. So we go on a 4-star scale. So 2.5, I mean, I've talked about it before. It's a movie that if it was on, I'd watch it. I'm not going to go out of my way, but I would watch it. It's not Thanksgiving and it's not Armageddon, 2 4-star movies I watched this week. But if it's on, I'd watch it. So I think it was to the benefit of this franchise and really to just the MCU as a whole that Thor Ragnarok was made the way it was and that Taika Waititi made the decisions that he made. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is a hard movie to get. Like if I was a new viewer, which I was one movie later, because when Black Panther came out, I had not seen any of these since, whatever, Captain America or whatever it was, since the Avengers. I hadn't seen any of them. But Black Panther was nominated for Best Picture. I've seen every Best Picture winners or Best Picture nominee since like 2000. I could probably even go back further than that. It's ridiculous. I'm trying to do them all.
Yep.
And so I said, I'm going to sit down and watch it. And I didn't know anything from prior to that. And I watched that movie and I said, I'm glad I don't watch these movies. I almost feel like Thor Ragnarok would give people a similar feel because if you just came into this, you might laugh at certain jokes and like certain parts, but it is a lot of just bright colors and flashes for a lot of the movie. And that is what the MCU does, especially in the Thor world. It is a lot of just colors, but it's not necessarily appealing to people who haven't already seen it. Now, look, at this time, the MCU was not concerned about getting more viewers. They had plenty. But right now, they're a little concerned about getting more viewers because, hey, Disney took a bath last week with the Marvels. Over the last couple of weeks, they've taken a bath. I mean, they're barely going to make, domestic, you're supposed to make what your movie's budget is. They're probably not going to do that. But Wish is coming out this week, and Wish is tracking terribly. Wish is about to be another box office disaster for Disney. $200 million movie. Probably only going to... What's that?
Sorry, probably going to make what?
Like 40, 45 million.
This is the first anime. It's because they started releasing movies on Disney Plus.
It was a huge mistake to release them on Disney Plus, but I also think that people, when they see a trailer now, or when they see the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, Disney's lost a lot of trust with the audience. They put out bad movies. They put out movies that felt lazy, and they put out just like movies that honestly the subject matter just wasn't that interesting for the majority of the population or for who they're targeting. I never saw Turning Red. And I know you really like Turning Red. But Turning Red's a tough sell for parents to go see that movie with their children. It's a tough sell.
Yeah.
It just is. And I'm not saying that movies like that shouldn't be made. I'm just saying it's a tough sell. So Disney right now is hurting. And like Thor Ragnarok, when I look at that, like a movie like Thor Ragnarok, I don't think would be the answer to getting back on the right track. But I do think a movie like Thor Ragnarok is what you should be expecting from the MCU. So I don't know if that matters or not, but
it's really interesting because we have a sequel. There's a fourth Thor. Thor has the most individual movies of any superhero in the MCU, which is weird. But we do have a sequel to this movie, directed by and written by Taika Waititi, and people said that it should rejuvenate everything, and it's pretty widely considered to be one of the worst. So it'll be interesting once we get there to like revisit this conversation to see, because like we kind of had that real life example of the Thor Ragnarok being the revitalizing part of the MCU, but it didn't happen. So it'll be interesting. But like Disney's at a point where they're they're making a lot of changes and a lot of statements lately on how they're approaching things.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you saw the statements, but Dave Filoni is in charge of Star Wars for Disney now as of yesterday, which is a huge change and a shift in their approach. We have the statements from Bob Iger saying that they are going to stop focus on turning out movies, and they are going to once again pay way more attention to quality over quantity of films. Like, they're saying a lot of the right things, so it'll be interesting to see when that actually it feels like that's taking place. But I don't know, like, yeah,
I have this for you. So Bob Iger says that. Do you think he is saying that because they're about to have a lot less coming out in the next 2 years because of the writers and SAG strike?
it's possible.
So they're trying to say, oh, look, we cut back on the quantity because the quality is better, when in reality, the quality is going to be the same as what they've been putting out. They just weren't able to make the quantity they were making because there was a 6-month strike.
It's possible. It's very, I would say it's probably even likely.
Yeah.
But maybe they actually have to take pause and actually think about that statement now because of it too, right? Like, they actually have to think about it, because if there's if they're telling people, hey, we are going to focus on quality, and they're saying it as a, hey, this is just because we're not turning out as many films as we usually do, they can't recover from that afterwards. Because then we've been given the promise of these are going to get better, and they stay at the same like mediocre quality they've been. People they will never gain the population's trust back again.
No. And like Patrick says, nothing is going to succeed when every movie for months hasn't looked worth watching. And I mean, The Marvels is one of those movies. You saw it. You said it wasn't really that bad, but the trailer for that movie was
awful.
Put out. So how are you going to attract people to that movie? And honestly, that was one of the ones that needed a good trailer. Thor doesn't need a good trailer. People are on board to go see a Thor movie. But The Marvels needed a good trailer, and it didn't have one. And that's not good. And so I am curious how this is going to go. I mean, look, it's Thanksgiving weekend. This and Memorial Day and Christmas are the 3 biggest days for movies at the box office. And I guess July 4th to an extent. But these are massive times. This needs to be a huge weekend. You're talking a 5-day weekend. It's Thursday, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you get the Wednesday night previews now. So there's people seeing these movies now. Wish needs to have a big weekend, and it's not going to. It's going to have a disastrous weekend for Disney. And The Marvels is in the process of the worst release Marvel has ever had.
Yeah.
People are when I talk to people and tell them I'm doing this podcast, oh, I'm so over the Marvel Cinematic Universe. These are people I never thought would say that. So it is really interesting. It's very interesting to see how the population's opinion has changed. I go to Disney World all the time. I love Disney World. You know, I do that. If anybody's trying to go on a Disney vacation, I can help you book your vacation. Costs you nothing. But follow, my link is it's not on this video. It's on the other ones, but it's through Main Street 55 Travel. And so I love Disney World. We just went to the Moana new attraction at Epcot, and it's new, and it doesn't really have too much Moana in it. It felt like old school Epcot. I loved it. I thought it was great. It's really for all ages. It's not just whatever. But I think people, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I think the general population is a little disappointed in it. Unless you have little kids, you might be disappointed in it because it might feel like it's more for little kids. But also, people need to remember that's really what Disney's brand originally was for. It was for little kids and their parents. I love that I'm 31 years old and I can go to Disney whenever I want and have a good time. I don't give a shit that people are, oh, you're clogging the lines. You're a Disney adult. Like you're a tool. I think anybody who thinks that is a tool. I love when people down in Florida, because I tell them all the time that I go to Disney all the time. They're always like, oh, I hate that place. I hate when I have to go with my kids and wife. And I'm like, that doesn't make you a cool guy. I think, honestly, I'm disgusted having to talk to you right now. So that's all aside. But when you're looking at the MCU, that was when Disney feels like it made the jump from being for kids and their parents to being for teenagers. And that made Disney a lot of money. But what's happening now is the opinions and what teenagers want, because you're not dealing with the same teenagers you were dealing with in 2008. We're 30 years old now. So you are dealing with a new generation of teenagers who are going to have different tastes, have a shorter attention span, and don't want to waste their time with stuff. Yeah. And you're not giving them good reason to go see this stuff. So I'm just really curious, I know this was about Thor Ragnarok, but we talked about it for a half hour anyway. So this is like my Thanksgiving is in 11 minutes here on the East Coast. Disney has an uphill battle, and Wish and the Marvels made that steeper. So I'm really, I'm excited kind of to see what they're going to do to try to change that. And Patrick says, I'd like to see a concerted effort to push classic film in theaters for a few months and get the inertia going. Maybe would have seen the Marvels if I'd seen a movie between then and Princess Mononoke. Yeah. Like, throw some movies up there. Throw up 101 Dalmatians. You're 100 years of Disney. That is what you're advertising. So
not releasing Disney movies every week.
That's what I'm saying. Every week on Thursdays at 7 p.m., every single Disney movie should be getting re-released. Thursdays at 7 p.m. and 9:30. All across the nation. People would see it. And you got to get people back into it. Because you know what? If Wish is a disaster, it's coming on the heels of Strange World, which is the biggest disaster in Disney history. It made $18.8 million.
Yeah.
They're in trouble. They're in trouble. And I love Disney. Like, I really do. I'm a huge Disney fan. I grew up with it. I love their movies. I'm going through, I've been stuck on 101 Dalmatians for weeks, but I really want these movies to be better. And Thor Ragnarok felt like it was fun. Even though it's not my cup of tea, it was a fun movie. It was, going for what the fans wanted.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily feel like that's the truth right now for all their other movies.
I agree. I will say we would be remiss if we didn't mention Carl Urban a little more in this movie, because I love Carl Urban in this movie. He
Lord of the Rings
doesn't say a specific 4-letter word as many times as he should in this movie, by which we mean he says it 0 times, and he says a lot in The Boys. But Carl Urban is hilarious when he plays this type of role.
Yeah, I agree.
And the moment when he jumps out of the ship with his 2 guns is so funny.
Des and Troy, baby. Or Des and Troy.
Des and Troy. It's so fun. And this is a character, again, this is what Taika Waititi did, right? He wrote off the characters he didn't want to write, and he just put in these new characters instead. And it was all for the better, because they were so much more fun.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. And does my Rock Man come back or no?
Korg does come back.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I like to hear that. I like Korg. I liked Carl Urban. Carl Urban is a very underused actor in Hollywood.
He is, but I enjoy him in everything he does.
Well, I mean, Lord of the Rings, man.
Lord of the Rings, Dread.
Never saw
Dread. Underrated film.
Yeah, it is. I've heard very good things.
Well, it's shadow directed by House Garland, so it's a really good film.
Yeah.
What else? Even the Star Trek, the JJ.
Yeah, I remember him from the Star
Trek movies, right? Yeah. And he's probably the best part of The Boys, right? So he's just an entertaining actor.
Yeah. You got anything else, or can I go enjoy my one day off?
Let me think. Thor Ragnarok. No, I guess we just see how Black Panther goes next week.
Yeah, so Black Panther and Napoleon. We're going to do Napoleon. Yeah. I'm not going to let anybody convince me to go do something else. I'm going to see Napoleon instead. I'm excited. I like Ridley Scott. I don't give a shit. I'm going to see it.
It only feels appropriate that if we're doing Black Panther, we have to talk about French imperialism at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, John, you know that I have an American education. I don't know what the hell you just said to me. So here we are. But yeah, I agree. I'm excited. I love what you sent me today, where Ridley Scott was called out by French critics. And when asked about it, he said the French don't even like themselves. I mean, I love that this guy's 85 years old and just going on an absolute tear. Because knowing that this could be the last movie he ever makes. He's talking about Gladiator 2 and stuff. But I mean, you're 85 years old. Anything can happen at any time. So I like that he is going in and really it seems like he's actually having a good time with this. So I'm excited for Napoleon. And I haven't even looked at what the reviews are because I don't care. Because pretty much any time Ridley Scott makes a movie with massive action sequences, I like it. So I'm ready.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It should be interesting. Revisiting Black Panther is going to be really interesting because I haven't seen it since it came out. and
Yeah,
was nominated
well,
for Best Picture, just like you. So it'll be
yeah.
it'll be an interesting conversation next week. I'm very sure.
I don't think it's going to be all that interesting. I think it's going to be a lot of me bitching. Dude, I'll tell you what, my roommate, when I was living in LA, when I was watching that movie, he would like come out of his room and like to go get something to drink. And I'd be like, why won't it end? Why won't it end? I mean, it's just not my cup of tea, man. But we'll talk about that next week and how it really showcased that these types of movies shouldn't be nominated for Best Picture. But John, there's actually an argument to be made that it wasn't the worst movie nominated for Best Picture that year, and that's saying a lot considering I despised it.
I'm going to have to look to see what those Best Picture nominees were again and bring that conversation next week.
I'll give you a hint, John, as I end this podcast. Another one bites the dust.
Oh, right.